In Quark's bar on Deep Space Nine, Riker downed a shot of replicator whiskey, grimaced, then followed it with a swig of synthale. As a round of groans broke out around Quark's Davo table, Riker noticed that Quark had set up another synthale and whiskey. "I didn't order those." Quark smiled winningly with a mouthful of teeth. "Congratulations on your new posting on Challenger, Commander. Tell me, is the Challenger your new posting?" "What possible business is that of yours, Quark?" Quark tapped the lobe of one of his ears. "What can I say? I like to keep my ears open." Riker grinned. "Do you have a choice?" He stepped away from the bar and made his way to the promenade entrance. Quark had been right. The night, according to DS9's duty clock, was young, and Quark's place was crowded. Riker counted at least 20 crew members from the Challenger, one of the newest Galaxy-class starships to be commissioned by Starfleet. It would be a fine posting. As he made his way up to the turbolift, he saw a Bajoran monk, face shrouded by a large hood, studying the promenade directory. The same monk who had stepped up to study the same directory when Riker had gone to the bar a half hour earlier. Riker didn't have to look back to know he was being followed. The turbolift provided a swift, if rough, ride to the habitat ring. Riker heard the turbolift hum behind him. Another car was arriving. He turned the corner and waited. But after 10 seconds, he still was unable to hear footsteps in the corridor. He checked, and the corridor was empty. He decided he'd been mistaken. Then DS9 exploded around him as the monk's fist hit his jaw. Riker staggered but remained on his feet. "What the devil do you think you're doing?" The monk lunged at him. Riker spun around and ran to the right, heading for one of the cargo bays assigned to Starfleet. The monk followed in close pursuit. Finally, Riker stumbled to a stop by cargo bay doors marked by the Starfleet Delta. He heard the monk closing in. Riker slapped the Kardashian wall pad and squeezed through the cargo bay doors before they had finished opening. He was relieved when the monk appeared and cast a long shadow into the bay. Whatever the monk was, he was physical. "There's nowhere to run on the station. Come out, Commander Riker." Riker stepped into a pool of light in the clear central section of the cargo bay. The monk walked toward him. Riker tensed. "You haven't told me what you want." The monk's hand flew out for Riker's neck. The cargo bay suddenly flooded with light. Out of nowhere, Worf's voice caught the monk off guard. "Do not move. 3 phasers are trained on your position." The monk slowly straightened up. "It's a roundabout way of saying you've got me covered." Worf stepped out from behind one stack of crates. To the other side of Riker, LaForge and Data appeared. All 3 held phasers. Worf waved his phaser at the monk. "Show your hands." Riker was startled as the monk suddenly pulled down on his robe and the fabric tore away from him. James T. Kirk's imposter. Riker stepped closer. The imposter raised his head. "You recognize me, don't you?" Riker stared intently at the false James Kirk. "Let's just say I recognize who you're supposed to be." There was a strong attitude of confidence and control in the imposter's bearing, exactly what Riker would have expected from the historical Kirk. But just for a moment, something else flashed behind those eyes. An unexpressed sense of pain, of loss. Riker wished Deanna were here now, though she would have her chance with this, whatever it was, soon enough. "Tell me, who am I supposed to be?" Riker snapped back. "What about the other question? Why do you want to find Captain Picard?" As if a live wire had been touched to the imposter, Riker saw his body stiffen as a hate-filled grimace took over his face. "Picard! He has to die. I have to kill him." Then, with a snarl of unbridled rage, the imposter threw himself at Riker and Worf's phaser dropped the imposter. 4 officers stood over their prisoner for a moment. One unspoken question shared among them. Riker touched his communicator. "Riker to Ops, beam me and this imposter to the infirmary." Even as the transporter locked onto them, the whispered word still hung in the silence. The last word the imposter had gasped as the phaser had claimed him. A word, a plea that only James T. Kirk would use. Spock. In Deep Space Nine's infirmary, Dr. Julian Bashir folded his arms and waited impatiently, as if everyone in the infirmary could interpret the Kardashian medical display as easily as he could. Deanna touched Riker's arm. "You believe now, don't you?" Riker nodded and rubbed his sore jaw. For a dead man, Captain James T. Kirk still packed one hell of a wallop. Surely the only explanation possible involved some kind of alien metaphysics, but Bashir had said no. The doctor touched the incomprehensible Kardashian controls, and the screen changed to display a quantum phase interior view of Kirk's skull and brain. Bashir shook his head. "Two possibilities, both of them unusual. This?" The display zoomed in to show a dense structure the size of a pen snaking around Kirk's medulla. "And these?" The screen shifted to what Riker recognized as an interior view of an artery. Mixed in with the blood cells that surged rhythmically by were smaller objects. "Nanites. I've seen this precise configuration before. In this case, they are repairing the extensive damage to the patient's tissue. But look back at the device in the patient's brainstem. It's perhaps the most sophisticated neural implant known to medical science. And all I know for certain is that it's killing Captain Kirk." Riker gave Bashir a sharp look. "Remove it." "I can't, Commander. What's required is far beyond my skill as a surgeon." "Does that mean someone else could?" Bashir nodded. "Possibly. There are a handful of devices as complex as this that have been encountered before and have been successfully removed by Starfleet doctors. Only one is on active duty. Beverly Crusher." Riker understood at once. "She removed the Borg implants from Captain Picard. Are you saying the device in Kirk is a Borg device?" "I can't even venture an opinion on that, Commander. But perhaps." Riker thought over his options. "This is an obvious question, but does Kirk know where the implant came from?" "I only spoke with him briefly, but he has no idea who he is." "Has he been programmed?" "Conditioned, yes." Bashir's next question was what Riker had been waiting for. "Commander, where is Dr. Crusher?" Riker drew himself up. "Dr. Bashir, Counselor Troy, under Starfleet General Order 3, I'm now invoking the Official Secrets Regulation of Stardate 7500 as amended, Stardate 42799. Bashir's eyes widened. "But those orders have to do with invasion." Riker pressed on. "Starfleet has reason to believe the Federation is facing imminent attack. Captain Picard and Dr. Crusher are on special assignment to prevent that attack. It is my opinion that James T. Kirk is in some way involved with these events, and I am taking it upon myself to transfer him to the last known location of Dr. Crusher. You are both hereby seconded to my command aboard the USS Challenger and ordered to prepare for immediate departure to Starbase 804. Deanna headed for the infirmary door without a single question. Riker had expected no less from her, but Bashir was another matter. "Now, Commander Riker, this ultra-secret business is all very interesting, but since everything we say from now on is ultra-secret, may I ask just who it is Starfleet thinks is about to invade us?" Riker had no time for junior officers who questioned orders in a crisis, no matter how personable, but just this once he would make an exception, if only to see the color drain from the young doctor's face. "The Borg, Dr. Bashir." The Starship Challenger eased back from the upper docking pylon which had been its berth at Deep Space Nine. Her Vulcan captain, Sim, set a course for Starbase 804. As the Challenger came about, the Bajoran wormhole irised open to admit a Klingon mining survey vessel. In the flood of exotic radiation that the wormhole itself emitted, a single directed pulse of tetrions was overlooked. Aboard the Avatar of Tomed, Salatral leaned to the side in her command chair, nervously stroking its arm. Sub-Commander Tran reported from his console. "We're receiving a passive return from the Tetrion pulse. Kirk is being moved on the Challenger." "Heading?" Tran checked his board, then stood to face Salatral. "The only port of call that makes sense is Starbase 804. Salatral turned in her chair to face her white-haired Centurion, Tracius. Is Starbase 804 of any particular significance? The Centurion's brow furrowed as he put all his years of experience and knowledge about the hated Federation to use. He is going to meet with Picard. Picard's location has disappeared from all available Starfleet computer networks. It is proper to assume that he is in some manner connected to Starfleet's efforts to build defenses against the Borg. And where better to hide an ongoing and perhaps illegal weapons research program than at a remote starbase of no particular importance, especially when some of the weapons they wish to develop could be used against the Romulan Star Empire. Salatrell's decision was swift. Laying a course to Starbase 804, remain cloaked, but stay in the Challenger's sensor shadow. Tran made no move to return to the helm. I believe Vox should be informed of our new course of action. Salatrell held his gaze, daring him to defy her leadership. Vox has other matters to attend to. I will send word back to the Dante base. Other matters? You don't even know where he is. You don't even know what he's doing. You're as much a puppet as Kirk is. Salatrell leapt to her feet and struck Tran with the back of her hand. If this were a Klingon ship, you'd be food for the captain's tard. Tran stumbled back to the helm and laid in a course to pursue the Challenger. Picard ducked low behind a sharply angled cube of mechanical components that jutted upward from the deck of the Borg corridor. Beside him, Beverly set her medical tricorder for distance. The closer they came to the sector that Picard believed held the captive crews of the Romulan ships, the worse the cloying scent of rotting flesh became. They rounded a corner and halted as they saw a 10-meter-long section of burnished green metal corridor, which could only have been lifted intact from a Romulan ship. Beverly rapidly scanned the area. I'm getting a strong life sign reading in that direction, in excess of 1,000. Most likely Romulan. They started forward again, but Picard stopped suddenly when they encountered the Romulan bulkhead. He stood in front of a Romulan display screen. Its command keys glowed, indicating the board was still active. Jean-Luc, you think that computer terminal is operational? We won't know until we try. Picard took a moment to reacquaint himself with the fat squiggles of Romulan script, then pressed the activate control. The screen came to life and displayed a menu. Picard gasped. Beverly, this terminal isn't connected to the Romulan ship system. It's connected to the station system. How efficient of them. Picard quickly called up a programming screen for his universal translator. The on-screen Romulan text melted into Federation Standard. He typed in a request for the current docking schedule. Beverly, this is astounding. Those warbirds we saw, they've all docked here within the past 30 hours. The Borg captured 10 intact warbirds in less than 2 days? Even Picard knew that couldn't be right. They aren't prisoners, are they, Jean-Luc? Picard shook his head. He asked for the flight plans of the warbirds. They are to depart in 100 hours, towed through a transwarp conduit to Sector 30, the location of the Borg's first attacks in our region of space, the neutral zone. Picard asked the computer to list any other vessels that would be departing at the same time as the warbirds. The screen scrolled with a seemingly endless row of Borg ships. Starfleet was right, Jean-Luc. The Borg are going to invade. But not by themselves. They've somehow allied themselves with the Romulans. Perhaps the Borg decided it was the only way to defeat the Federation. He held his fingers over the keyboard, poised to enter another request. I'm going to ask it to show me the unit responsible for this plan. Beverly nodded, making no move to dissuade him. In response to his inquiry as to who had masterminded the Borg-Romulan alliance to attack the Federation, the screen showed two individuals, walking in a corridor somewhere in the hypercube station. One was a Borg-Romulan of no particular importance, but the other individual was Ambassador Spock. After Tyrrell and Snell had handed Spock over to Trakul, the notorious Romulan smuggler, Trakul had brought Spock to his real buyer, 52 kilometers southwest of Dartha, the capital city of Romulus. A hooded figure had come forward immediately, pulled out a disruptor, and aimed it at Dracul. Before Dracul could run, orange fire flickered over the shale, and the smuggler had been consumed. The hooded figure had motioned to Spock. "You will come with us." In a heartbeat, Spock had brought his hand to the base of the figure's neck, positioned his fingers, and pinched the nerves beneath them. The Vulcan nerve pinch had done nothing. The figure had moved, pulling back his hood to reveal the cranial implant plates that cruelly puckered the flesh of his Romulan features. Spock had recognized their origin when Vox spoke. "Resistance is futile." Spock remembered his reply. "Indeed." Spock now paused at the intersection of 4 passageways, leading from the Borg docking chamber which had just received him. All about him, the maintenance crew of the Warbird, which had conveyed him here, strode off into the depths of the hypercube station as confidently as if they were on shore leave on their home world. It was a disturbing scene, given all it implied about the state of affairs between the Borg and the Romulans. It required no heroic leaps of faith to accept that Borg technology had reanimated James T. Kirk, and that the purpose of the reanimation was elementary. Kirk had stated it himself. His mission was to kill Jean-Luc Picard. Most likely, Spock concluded, to keep Starfleet from accessing some Borg secret still contained in Picard's mind, which could lead to the Borg's eventual defeat. "You will continue walking." On their voyage here from Romulus, Vox had made it clear what Spock's fate would be. He was to be assimilated, to become speaker to the worlds of Vulcan. "When will I be assimilated?" "By standard Federation units within 8 minutes. They had come to an open turbolift. Vox and Spock stepped into it, and the turbolift dropped downward. Spock decided it was time to see how robust Borg programming was. "I do not wish to be assimilated." "That will be corrected." "Why is the crew of the Warbird not being assimilated?" "It is not yet their time." "Do the Romulan crew members know they are to be assimilated?" "No, they are an experiment. They are not to be assimilated until they aid us in assimilating the Federation." "In other words, you will betray the Romulans when your goals have been accomplished." "We will not betray them. We will correct their misperception of the collective." Spock struck another blow. "Knowing Romulans as I do, if your Borg-Romulan alliance defeats the Federation, then while the Borg forces are still weakened by the conflict, the Romulan armada will attack you without mercy." Vox seemed unimpressed. "The Borg fleet will not be weakened. The Federation will not fall in battle. It will be betrayed by a highly placed member of Starfleet." Spock was startled. "Who is that individual?" Vox stepped out of the turbolift and gestured to the side. "You will be assimilated now." Vox lifted his arm graft, and a blue spark leapt out to encase Spock in a halo of radiant energy. Spock collapsed to the floor without sensation below his neck, yet he remained conscious. 4 Borg surrounded him and lifted him, one for each limb, and carried him along the corridor and into a nearby chamber. Spock saw an unusual chair frame that appeared to be fused with a medical examination table. Surgical equipment hung from the ceiling and whirred into life. Logically, he knew he should accept defeat and prepare himself for the loss of his existence. But in a final act of will, he refused. Even as the first slender waveguides punched through his skin and the drills sang as they readied to pierce him, Jim Kirk had never accepted defeat, and for his sake, neither would Spock. Picard and Beverly jogged endlessly through the dimensionally distorted passageways of the Borg station. "Jean-Luc, stop. We're going in circles." The frustration Picard felt at Spock being assimilated made him tremble with rage. He had to do something. He had to save Spock. Then he heard the clang of heavy boots on the Borg deck. The Borg, who was approaching, stopped. Locutus, you are malfunctioning. We cannot detect you within the collective. There is no malfunction. Some units are being suppressed in order to avoid detection by Federation forces when the attack begins. The Borg glanced down at Picard. The laser played over Picard's right arm. You have been modified. You must be repaired. That assessment is correct. You will escort me to the nearest assimilation chamber for repair. The Borg faced Beverly. What is this? This is a prisoner with the information about the Federation. It will be assimilated after repairs have been made. That is relevant. Picard felt Beverly's hand brush his as they marched behind the Borg. She carried a photon grenade. He nodded his understanding. If he had placed them into a no-win situation, they would not allow themselves to be assimilated. It was that simple. Picard walked past an open turbolift. The lift platform was rising, and a familiar figure was on it. The figure looked their way, and for a moment before the platform disappeared into the next higher level, their eyes made direct connection. Spock. But his flesh was unmarked. His skull bore no neural plates. All his limbs were intact. Beverly plucked at his arm. Did you see him, Jean-Luc? He wasn't assimilated. The Borg stopped. Picard stood in the entrance to the assimilation chamber. He had to go after Spock. He looked at the Borg. This assimilation chamber has malfunctioned. The Borg took on the faraway gaze that indicated it was communing with the collective. This assimilation chamber is operational. You are in need of repair. No. A Vulcan was here. He was placed in the frame. He was not assimilated. Explain. The Vulcan was not assimilated because the effort would have been a waste of resources. The neural waveguides identified the presence of the collective in the Vulcan's mind. Conclusion, the Vulcan is already part of the collective. To assimilate him would be redundant. Beverly gasped. Spock was already a Borg. Spock had spent 80 years working with Romulans. A new era of peace had dawned between Romulus and the Federation, leading to a reduction of the forces defending the neutral zone, making the neutral zone the perfect place from which to launch an invasion. Picard whispered to Beverly, "He's one of them." Starfleet would have to be warned. Picard lunged out and snapped the Borg's interface cable free. Its high-pitched scream was piercing, agonized, inconsolable, because it was alone. With one swift motion, Picard took the photon grenade from Beverly, twisted the activator, and threw it at the keening Borg. Then he grabbed Beverly's hand and he ran. The explosion erupted into the corridor behind them like a solar flare. 3 more Borg appeared in the corridor. Picard approached them immediately. There's been a malfunction. The collective is in danger. Communications are breaking down. The Borg pushed past them. Beverly turned to Picard. Where to now? Picard felt flushed with purpose. To find Spock. If we want to save the Federation, we'll have to stop him by whatever means possible. As Spock waited for the turbolift to stop, he dabbed a corner of his robe against the pinpricks of green blood on his temple. The wires had entered his skin. He had felt them press through the layers of his temporalis fascia to make contact with his skull, and then nothing. After less than a minute, the surgical devices had returned to their storage positions on the ceiling. His restraints had opened, and Vox and the other Borg attendants had left. Why had he not been assimilated? And what was Picard doing in the heart of the collective? Picard's current situation did much to explain why Commander Riker had been so uncommunicative on Deep Space Nine. Perhaps he had known that his captain had returned to the Borg. Indeed, if according to Vox, an act of treason was going to set the stage for the Borg-Romulan attack on the Federation, who better than Picard to be that individual? The turbo-lift stopped on the hangar bay level. Spock hesitated. Locutus was somewhere below in the station. Spock could only see one logical course of action available to him. Captain Lewinsky tapped the arm of his chair as he regarded the static backdrop of stars that filled the monitor's view screen. Navigator Land cut abruptly through the background hum of the bridge. "Here she comes, Captain, and is she fast?" On the view screen, the USS Challenger appeared dead ahead, smoothly dropping from warp no more than 500 kilometers away. Tupper, the science officer, turned to Lewinsky. "Captain, we should run a full diagnostic on our cloaking device. When the Challenger dropped from warp, I recorded a tachyon surge. Our cloaking field might have reacted to the Challenger's subspace backwash." Lewinsky sighed. "Do it." Then he turned back to face the main screen and Captain Sim of the Challenger. Only the old Vulcan wasn't on the screen. It was Will Riker. "Will, it's good to see you again." "I wish it were under other circumstances, Captain, but we are now operating under General Order 3. Commander Shelby will have provided you with encrypted orders to open at this time. Riker out." High above New Titan, the space black disk of the monitor rippled out of nothingness, less than half the size of the Challenger's command saucer. On the bridge of the Avatar of Tomed, Tran turned to Salatrell in surprise. "Commander, a vessel has decloaked beside the Challenger." The blocky Starfleet vessel they had followed from Deep Space Nine was no match for a warbird, and Salatrell felt no concern about facing it in battle. But the ship that had appeared beside the Challenger was a different matter. A Defiant-class vessel specifically designed, built, and equipped to fight the Borg. Salatrell turned to Tran. "Identification. It has not been encountered before, and it does possess a functioning cloaking device." Salatrell turned to her Centurion. "Tracius, can you offer any explanation for that ship's presence?" "Look at the scans of the planet's surface." Salatrell called them up. The radiation signature of a Borg tractor beam flared brilliant white at the coordinates of Starbase 804. Salatrell whirled to face Tracius. "The Borg took the Starbase. Why?" His face was clouded with anger. "How can you be surprised that the Collective doesn't tell us everything? Have you learned nothing from me? Before you can defeat your enemy, you must understand your enemy. This assimilation of the Starbase, it's just one action they've taken without informing us." Salatrell tightened her fists at her side. "Vox told me your lover told you only what you wanted to hear. Can't you see what you've done? The entire movement to overthrow the cowardly appeasers on Romulus has been set aside in order for you to pursue your revenge against one human." Salatrell's hand tightened on her weapon. "The Borg brought us the device which returned Kirk to life," Tracius argued, "to distract you from everything else they do." Salatrell's teeth clenched. "The Borg want Picard dead. Kirk can do that. Are there no other assassins in our movement who could have done the same? Leave the bridge, Centurion." But Tracius pointed to the screen instead. "The Borg are playing their own game against you." Salatrell closed her eyes, heard the whine of her disruptor, felt the heat of its discharge as Tracius fell. Then she returned to her chair. To Tran, she said, "Is the Challenger in standard orbit?" "Affirmative, Commander." "Very good. Each time it crosses the Terminator and comes into line of sight with the local sun, send it to try and pulse to confirm the location of Kirk." Tran looked up from his board. "Commander, they will be able to detect that pulse. We have no wormhole to hide it. They'll worry about it until they see it happens each time they come out of New Titan's shadow. Then they'll catalog it for later study. Know your enemy, Tran." "Yes, Commander." Everywhere he went on the Challenger, Riker faced the ghost of the Enterprise. But sickbay was virtually unchanged, and as Riker entered, he half expected Beverly Crusher to step out of her office. But instead he saw Julian Bashir at Kirk's bedside. Kirk was still in induced sleep. En route to New Titan, Bashir had confirmed that reducing the reanimated patient's metabolism rate slowed the nanites as well. Each hour Kirk remained unconscious was another hour longer he would live. Bashir pointed to the scanner. Riker recognized some of the technical schematics on its display. Starfleet's reverse engineering of the Borg implants that had been recovered from Captain Picard. Bottom line, Commander, the implant in the patient's brain is a Borg device, but the nanites aren't. Do I understand what you're saying, Doctor? 2 different technologies are present in Kirk? Bashir nodded glumly. Someone's working with the Borg. Doctor, with additional information in the classified files, do you feel it is possible for you to remove the implant from Kirk? What about Dr. Crusher? Dr. Crusher is missing. We have no idea where she is or when she might return. Bashir looked at his patient, but Riker didn't have time for thoughtful consideration. Dr. Bashir, if the Borg have allied themselves with another race, then all of Starfleet's efforts to develop adequate defenses are at risk. It is imperative that we release Kirk from his programming, so we will be able to interrogate him about who did this to him and why. Riker held Bashir's gaze with an intense stare. Now I ask you again, can you remove the implant? Bashir lowered his voice, as if afraid his patient could hear him. There is no question that I can remove it, Commander. I just don't know if the patient will survive the attempt. Riker closed his eyes for a moment. There was no time to calculate the odds. He looked at Bashir. Do it. You're asking me to perform a procedure which might kill him? Riker grimaced. You may consider it an order, Doctor. A few hours later in sickbay, they gathered around his bed. Through a fog, Kirk heard a voice say, Yes, he's coming around. He squinted at the blinding light that shone past his hand and clenched eyes. Turn it off. The light vanished. There were people by his diagnostic bed. He recognized them. And why not? He had tried to kill some of them. Geordi LaForge, the android, Data, Worf the Klingon, a woman he didn't recognize with eyes so dark they appeared black, and Kirk stared at the tall man with the dark beard. Commander Will Riker? Captain Kirk. It is a pleasure, sir. Kirk took a breath, hardly knowing where to begin. My first impression is that I've been dreaming. But I haven't been, have I? Riker smiled. No, sir, and we're going to leave you with Dr. Bashir to get you caught up on present conditions. But I have to know, sir, do you remember what happened to you after you assisted Captain Picard on Veridian 3? Kirk suddenly knew what he had to do. I remember falling. Someone spoke to me, and then I woke up here. Riker nodded glumly. I see. Well, if anything comes back to you, it's of critical importance for us to know how you came to be here. Once the sickbay doors had closed behind them, Riker stopped Troy in the corridor. He had to know. You heard what he said, Deanna. He remembered Veridian, then waking up here, and nothing in between. He's very confused, Will. But I believe he's lying about not remembering anything. When you mentioned Captain Picard's name, I felt such hatred coming from Kirk. Riker turned to Worf. Mr. Worf, I want Kirk under constant surveillance, because if we don't find out who's working with the Borg soon, we're all going to be programmed, just like Kirk. In an instant, blazing like a sudden sun, the Challenger moved from the shadow of New Titan into the light. A Tetrian pulse accompanied the moment of transition, as it had for every orbit the great ship had made of this planet. On the bridge of the Avatar, cloaked 100,000 kilometers from New Titan, and the Challenger and her companion ship, Tran read the sensor return on the Tetrian pulse he had sent. It wasn't good news. Commander, the implant has been removed from Kirk. Salatrell studied Tran's screens over his shoulder. I was told the implant would be impossible to remove. It appears I was lied to, does it not? So there's only one chance we have to succeed, and that is for Kirk to kill Picard. Picard must die. The Borg and Federation must destroy themselves. And then the wings of the Romulan Empire will embrace all the stars of all the galaxy. Salatrell turned to the view screen to face the Challenger. Take us in, Sub-Commander. Full impulse. Flood both ships with high-resolution sensors. Then take an evasive course behind the sun. They'll look for us, but they won't find us. I want to know Kirk's position and location. Trans set a flyby course to intercept the Challenger. Kirk stood in front of a mirror in an alcove of sickbay, examining himself in his uniform. It was a perfect fit. All that was missing was his Starfleet insignia. He looked again at the tiny badge he'd been given instead to pin onto his jacket. Supposedly, it functioned as a communicator. Kirk decided he missed the old handheld model, getting set in his ways, he supposed. He slipped out of the patient alcove and looked around the sickbay again. So much to digest. Almost 80 years of history had passed him by. This ship, what he could see of it, looked like it would put both his own enterprises to shame, and the new friends, the new enemies, especially the Borg. But before he could ask Dr. Bashir any more questions, red alert sounded, and Riker's voice reverberated from the speakers, ordering all crew to battle stations. Riker sat beside Captain Sim on the bridge of the Challenger. Every sensor display was lit up, flashing its warnings. Worf's voice thundered from his security station at the rear of the bridge. "We have been subjected to full sensor sweep, Captain." Data reported from his ops board. "I am recording an anomalous tachyon surge, consistent with a cloaking device." Captain Sim remained calm. "Is it from the monitor?" "Negative, sir. Flyby of a cloaked vessel, sir." Sim stood up. "A precipitating action implies that conditions have changed from those which did not require a scan to those which did. What conditions have changed upon this vessel in the past 30 minutes, Commander Riker?" Riker thought frantically. The Vulcan captain was making him feel like a first-year academy student. James T. Kirk became conscious. Hence, logic dictates we have been under surveillance by a cloaked ship that knows Kirk is aboard, knows Kirk has an implant of Borg manufacture, and knows that this implant has been removed. That ship is our enemy. Its commander has information that is valuable to the Federation. Hence, Commander, we should try to capture that vessel." Sim studied Riker. "But before we capture it, we must find it. If I had seen the monitor decloak, I would assume the Challenger had the capabilities of detecting the tachyon surge common to cloaking devices. I would set a course at maximum warp, leading out of the system, then angle back and come in from another direction on impulse." Sim turned to the view screen. "So, the enemy is hiding on the other side of the sun, out of sensor range. Mr. Worf, hail the monitor." Riker and Worf exchanged a look of grudging appreciation for Sim's analysis as the captain of the Challenger ordered Lewinsky to cloak the monitor, leave the system, then double back to the other side of the sun. Sim sat back in the center section of the command bench. "I believe you should now check on the condition of Kirk. We cannot rule out the possibility of two-way communication with the cloaked vessel." Riker stood up. The captain was correct. Another alarm chimed on the bridge. Riker and Sim both looked up at Worf. "Sir, a transwarp conduit has just opened before us and a Borg scout ship has emerged. It is requesting clearance to land." Worf noticed Riker checking the power setting on his phaser for the 10th time. In the cold air of the Challenger's main shuttle bay, the Klingon's breath clouded with vapor as he whispered, "The shuttle bay is sealed, Commander. Nothing will happen." It wasn't every day that Starfleet invited a Borg vessel to board one of its starships. Riker, Worf, LaForge, Deanna, and Data waited by the cleared landing platform. As the main bay doors opened onto empty space, the ship's atmosphere was contained by the annular force field that remained in place. Riker then saw the dark smudge that was the Borg scout ship heading closer. The scout ship glided in between the Challenger's nacelles and then slipped through the atmospheric force field. Riker led the others to the hatch opening in the patched-together ship. A Borg stepped out, methodically scanned them with his laser as a second figure came out behind him. Spock raised his hand and gave the traditional salute. "Peace and long life, Commander Riker." Spock gestured to the Borg beside him. "May I introduce my pilot, 6 of 12. By way of greeting, the Borg responded. "You will be assimilated?" Spock stepped in front of the Borg. "You will guard the scout ship. I will make arrangements for the efficient assimilation of this ship and her crew." The Borg lowered his manipulator arm. "That is relevant." He returned to the scout ship, and the hatch hissed shut behind him. Spock joined his surprised welcoming committee and studied them. "Is there a problem, Commander Riker? The last I heard, Ambassador Spock, you had returned to Romulus." "I did. While there, I uncovered a Borg-Romulus alliance which intends to attack the Federation from the neutral zone, following an act of treachery by a high-ranking member of Starfleet, Jean-Luc Picard." Riker smiled coldly. "Nice try, but Captain Picard and Beverly Crusher are on special assignment to fight the Borg." "Then I regret to inform you, they have lost their fight. I encountered Captain Picard on a Borg transwarp station. He is now Locutus. Indeed, it is possible that he has always been Locutus. 6 of 12 was in full contact with the Collective until we left the Borg station. He will confirm all that I have told you." Riker glanced at Deanna, who nodded. As far as she could tell, Spock was telling the truth. Riker forced a smile at Spock again. "If your story can be confirmed, what do you propose we do?" "I am not a tactician, Commander, but I would surmise that the first step would be to mass a defensive fleet at the neutral zone." "Ambassador, I'm sure the Romulans would enjoy seeing that. It would leave the entire frontier undefended, and that's our dilemma. Are you telling the truth, or are you diverting our attention from the real attack?" Data stepped forward. "Ambassador, if I may, how did you manage to escape from the Borg station where you say you saw Captain Picard?" "I asked 6 of 12 to transport me to the place from which Locutus had arrived. I cannot explain why, but the Borg somehow believe that I am already one of them." Riker turned to Worf. "Mr. Worf, escort Ambassador Spock to sickbay. I'll want Dr. Bashir to scan him for implants and nanites." Deanna interrupted. "Will, what about Captain Kirk?" Riker watched Spock carefully. "Ambassador, you should know Kirk is here, in sickbay." "What is Kirk's condition?" Deanna shook her head. "Not well. He is infested with nanites that are reconfiguring his body at a molecular level. We have no way of stopping the process in time to save him. He has a few days." "I'm sorry." Riker tapped his comm badge. "Riker here." It was Captain Sim. "Commander, I thought you would be interested to know. Another Borg scout ship has emerged from a conduit and has requested permission to dock." The scout ship in which Spock had arrived was quickly hidden from view by several pallets of modular crates. Worf took the defensive precaution of standing by to explosively decompress the shuttle bay. In addition, Transporter Control was keeping a real-time coordinate update on every comm badge, ready for an emergency beam-out at any second. Once again, a Borg scout ship, slightly different in configuration from the first, eased in through the shuttle bay door force field and touched down perfectly. For a moment, Riker didn't recognize the configurations of the two Borg who tumbled out of the craft. The third Borg, which remained in the hatchway, stoically watching the others leave, was more typical. Data ran forward at once. "Captain Picard! Dr. Crusher!" Riker shouted at him. "Data, get back here!" Picard and Crusher approached Riker cautiously, as though both were attuned to the tension in the air. They wore space black battle armor. Picard spoke first. "Will, Geordi, Data, it's good to see you again." Picard tucked his fingers beneath the edge of the plate and began to pull. Riker went on alert, half expecting to see raw flesh laced with a filigree of neural implant wires, as Picard ripped the neural implant plate from his face. But instead, he saw innocuous threads of surgical glue and unmarked skin. Riker lowered his phaser. Picard gave him a questioning look.
Well, did you think I had been assimilated again?
It was Spock's voice which answered.
Not again, Captain Picard.
Everyone turned to see Spock emerge from behind a pallet of modular crates, Worf at his side, phaser drawn. Picard smiled.
Very good. You've apprehended the person responsible for the Borg-Romulan alliance, Ambassador Spock.
Spock raised an eyebrow.
Captain Picard is the one who has betrayed the Federation.
Riker turned to Deanna. Her face was a mask of confusion.
They're both telling the truth.
Riker shook his head angrily.
Or they've all been programmed.
Spock stepped to Picard's side.
There is no logic in what you're suggesting is my connection to the Collective Commander. The Borg and the Romulans are within days, if not hours, of attacking the Federation.
Spock and Picard faced each other at the same time. Both spoke at the same time.
And he is the one responsible.